Morning, everyone. Put a 60-second countdown timer to start, and that was almost a little too fast. Just to make sure I've got everything up and running so we can get going. There's always so many little things to just make sure are good to go. Hope everyone had a good morning so far. Slept well last night. Let's see. I feel like I'm missing something. Hold on. I don't think so. Crazy, crazy markets. Gonna get my stuff kind of set up here. Looks like we got a nice little overnight high. Been double tested on the NASDAQ. Definitely could see. Looks like we're kind of in a kind of just in our grind tire with a range going on. I'll see a bigger picture here in a second. Uh, let's see, big picture. What do we got going on? Looks like oil pretty much just came up to this area yesterday and just sold off. So it definitely kind of kept that trend, that downtrend. I think an interesting big picture level is that we're bouncing off this right now on oil, kind of this 90 level. Question is that going to be a spot that we like? Is oil going to make kind of a double bottom here? Because we're definitely like looking at a daily chart for oil. We've had two pretty massive down days. We're just kind of in the middle of this range still, kind of towards the lows where we could start to find some support. And so we could bounce a little bit if it seems like it's overextended, but unless there's news, I think oil will just grind lower and the market's going to grind higher. That just seems the name of the game right now. 15-minute on oil, not much else there. We had this big fair value gap move up yesterday, and it did eventually kind of just get that back up. 5-minute can probably draw this a little bit better. Excuse me. Yeah, I mean, I don't see anything crazy there. Just kind of see how it touches this level. I think that's going to be important. And looking at the major markets, definitely want to just keep track of the highs. Like when we're just making new highs here, Not really a great overnight support level I would see is this guy, which is pretty much just where it, where it basically came down to after it opened here after the close yesterday. Bounced off of this high, kind of bounced here, and then kind of went up. That's on a 15-minute. But I mean, like, big picture, just kind of, we're in a massive, massive move up right now. Looking at a daily chart, uh, we've got multiple big days right here. We had this big trend up here that honestly looks like it could still be holding here on a 15 minute for the NASDAQ. That'll be interesting to see. I think another thing is like here's I would say the overnight support based on that kind of high and the market open bounce. So I would say we're kind of in this range. This is like the overnight range that we often get. I think kind of seeing how it reacts to the lows and the highs and looking for a trade based on that. And again, I think looking leaning to the long side as usual. And on a 1 minute here, 5 minute first actually. Um, Nothing super crazy. Maybe there's a trend like that, but that's not really. I'm not even going to draw that since it kind of went up here and bounced. Got overextended there. Not really a crazy amount to look at a 5 minute. The Nasdaq's just in the middle of the range right now, so I don't think the open's going to be crazy. I think that it's going to be open, see which direction we move, and look to go off of that. Um, if we're going to slowly grind higher or not. Uh, let's see. I mean, I think today is nothing crazy different compared to the last few days. We might have another chop fest at open, yeah. Uh, but I don't think that means that there's not going to be a potential for a trade. I think there definitely is. Um, Give me 1 second. I need to go blow my nose. Okay. Um, let's see, and then we'll see if there's news. Morning, everyone. Get ready for your patience to be tested. Yeah, probably. That's just the trickiness of this market. Yesterday was frustrating for me. In the sense of I'm starting to get to a point where uh I want to start trying to, especially in this market and just how this market is acting. I want to be trying to catch these reversals too. They're not necessarily my bread and butter. Usually my, bread and butter is my trades I like to see kind of a clean flush in one direction, look for like that to flip and have that just reverse quickly. I like to trade momentum reversals, and these are much more just like round bottom, slowly grind higher reversals. And I can spot these, but I don't I've been working on the last couple weeks of how do I actually enter in on them? Where does my stop go? Where does my entry go? How do I get, good risk reward from these trades? How do I execute on them? It's one thing to be able to spot a move. That the next thing, and a huge key part of the trading side, obviously, is to be able to profitably capture that move. Um, and obviously, in hindsight, with this, it's like, okay, well, entering in anywhere, you would have caught this move up. Um, but trying to do that in these markets that are these choppy, slow reversals where it makes sense. And so I've been trying to wrestle with that a little bit. And I think this weekend I'll have more time to kind of sit down, review the last couple weeks of, for you guys who have been here consistently, you'll have, there was honestly the only two losses I've taken have been spots like this where I've got in and my stop has been too tight, and the markets just chop me out before it doesn't move like this. And so what I want to try and do is I want to approach these with the idea that, okay, I'm not looking for, this quick whip back up. I'm just looking to see, okay, big picture, the trend, even looking at the 5 minute from yesterday. Um, like the 5 minute yesterday was gorgeous with this kind of head and shoulders, higher low bottoming pattern that it was making. And I could see that in real time, but because I didn't have a plan ready of how to jump in, to me, you don't want to make something up while you're trading, right? You want to observe and then make a plan after, and then come into the next day or the next week, however you want to do it, with that setup. You don't want to be trying to do that in real time while you're trading. That's just a disaster waiting to happen. Um, and so I want to come in and start to look at these. And I think I want to be putting my low, or my stop. If I'm looking to buy here, I want to be putting my stop below the extreme low. Because generally the read I have with these is, okay, I think I can see when we put in most likely at extreme low if it's going to continue higher. But I don't know what this is going to look like. I think it could just chop around before, because it's not, there's so little momentum and it's kind of choppy. It could just do this and then it'll eventually, kind of like how we had yesterday, where it was really choppy, really hard to read, especially with the Nasdaq. The Nasdaq just did this for a while before it kind of got going. And so I don't want to get chopped out in this. And so having a very much wider stop, probably going smaller size, assuming that I'm probably not going to get great risk reward. I'm probably going to get 1 or 2x, which is still good long term, if they can play out. But usually I like to be, I like to have my stop much smaller, right? Where it's like, okay, if we give this whole swing back, I'll get 3 or 4 times my risk. And so that's just an adjustment that I'm trying to work on right now, and an addition I'm trying to make. But it's something you want to do slowly over time, because it's you don't want to just be adding stuff willy-nilly to your trading. You want to see how it has been going over the last few weeks, see if you're spotting that, seeing where you would enter. And then I think, because I think this weekend I'll go in and I'll kind of review a lot of those charts. And then I will come in next week and start to look for those, but I'll probably take half size or 1/3 size, with the idea that I'm not looking to make money off of these slow swings yet. I'm just looking to get data on myself and how I execute in these areas. What is it like having that much wider stop? What is it like getting in when there's not kind of that clean bottom momentum reversal that I really like? And so, and then, executing that, because you got to be able to execute on it with some kind of size, because otherwise you're just, in hindsight being like, oh, I'll get in here, and then, it's not the same, right? You got to put something on the line for it to really be real. And then from there, it's just journaling it and slowly getting used to it and seeing how that plays out over time. and and going from there. And that's kind of how you add that stuff. Um, and to me, that's something I feel like I'm ready for in my trading, even though usually and I might never full size in those spots because those slower bottoms, the risk reward and stuff isn't as good. So it might always be something that it's like, okay, this kind of round bottom where I'm just looking to catch some kind of momentum move up where I get 1x or 2x. Um, that might always be a half size trade versus these spikes where the risk reward is way higher and the momentum's there. Those might be the only ones I ever full size. You might argue just stick with your strategy and then increase size. Yeah, I mean that's a massive thing I preach. Is just don't even care about that stuff. It's not worth the mental energy. Um, and it's kind of a balancing act between um, if I'm spotting those spots, and it's almost like yesterday, and a couple of these spots where I am entering or I almost am watching. Um, that is, and in hindsight afterwards, looking at that and being like, oh, that's I saw this and I want to start taking this. Like seeing this move yesterday after that, after the fact, um, that's also a mental drain of and just that's how trading is sometimes of you need to adapt to what's going on. um, but obviously you don't want to overdo it, and so it's a very tricky balancing act, I would say. uh, so that's kind of what I'm looking at and how I'm thinking about approaching that. Why not just stay long until it reverses versus tiny reversals? I mean, blanketly, that's just not my strategy. That's much more of a swing trading strategy. It's in a market like this, you don't the trend could end at any time. Um, in hindsight, it's like, oh well, you should have just bought. We're in a massive uptrend. Um, but this market's insanely difficult right now. I keep hearing from like my trading coach who coaches and talks to people that are running like hedge funds and managers like that. He says they don't even know how to trade this market because it's just so tricky. And so, if those geniuses don't know what to do, I don't feel so bad about struggling right now either. So just to run through things again, for everyone just coming in, good morning. Uh, Big picture this morning on the S&P 500, I'm just seeing kind of this overnight range. We definitely just moved up overnight. Um, I think the bias is still just long until proven otherwise, but keeping in mind that we do have these volatile pullbacks. So if we get too much to the upside, definitely I'll be looking for a short potentially. But I think a long off the bottom is better. And so that's kind of what I'm looking there. I just see kind of an uptrend trend line and then looking for this box. NASDAQ's a little cleaner with the overnight range that it's had. Kind of off this pre-market or yesterday's high. And then we kind of bounced off of that again. And then we got this overnight double top here. So that's kind of what I'm looking at there. Oil on the is doing the reverse. We've pretty much given back this spike up here on oil. So the thought is, okay, are we going to double bottom here and it's going to go back up? Because oil has been in a big downtrend. Even on a daily chart, there's a little bit of a fair value gap from yesterday. So are we going to come back up here? I don't know if oil would just do that by itself. To me, oil's big moves to the upside are news based, and if there's not really much change in news, I think we're just going to slowly grind lower. Um, and so I think until then, oil is probably just going to continue down, slowly, but you know, I'm sure there'll be some back and forth, but big picture, I think it'll slowly continue down. And then the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq, I think they're just going to slowly grind higher as well. But we got to, you know, be aware that things might be choppy. Things might slowly do kind of a round bottom like we've had. Uh, you know, Nasdaq kind of has this middle of the range overnight low here. That's kind of middle of the range, the overnight range though. So I don't know if I'd necessarily look for a long here, but I might consider it because if this thing just looks like it's strong enough, if it just is going to have a spike lower and then continue the trend, I think definitely could back put a little bit. I think that's definitely a spot where it could go to the upside. We've had spots like that where it just has a little bit of a pullback in the morning and then continues higher. So I definitely look for a trade in either direction today, just depending on where we move. Just to look at news real quick. We don't really have much news today. Honestly, there's not really anything. At 10 o'clock, we have super minor news. Construction spending, month over month. That doesn't really mean anything. So tomorrow morning's got pretty big news pre-market. So I could see that doing something. But until then, you know, I haven't caught anything this morning yet. I mean, there's not much going on yet. Pre-market looks like it's just been choppy. This is why I don't really like trading pre-market. So often it can just sit here and do nothing. I mean, look at this. It's for an hour. I mean, really recently, pre-market has just been garbage. And so to me, that's just wasting time in front of the charts and draining yourself. Is scalping futures easier or harder than swing trading for beginners with a small account? I so I guess it kind of depends how you label each of those things. I would say I prefer, to me, capturing kind of more of the swing of the day versus scalping little moves. You know, like typically scalping is like you're just taking tiny moves out of the trend. I think for anyone, I've tried both, and I think a lot of people do it on YouTube and stream scalping, and I think it's just so intense and hard to actually consistently do because it's so fast paced. Um, and the side you don't really see about that is because it's so fast paced and you have to make a decision like instantly when you see something, it causes you to impulsively do things based on those intense emotions. And so it makes it even easier for you to FOMO in or hesitate because it's like you have to make a decision right now versus slowing things down. Like that's why I used to trade way smaller time frame charts. Like if think about it, if you traded a 30-second chart or 15-second chart or like a volume based chart or a tick based chart, those can move really really fast. And again, they just I think increase that intensity versus if you trade like a 1 minute, it's slower. If you trade a 5 minute, it's even slower. It allows you to be a lot more methodical um, with your trading. And then I think going for kind of the bigger picture stuff, swings, I think also makes it so you don't have to really like, you know, think about all those little moves and take like 50 different trades. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. I trade more like a sniper, not a scalper. Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it. Is like you're patiently waiting for the right spot. And even though it's like I'm day trading just 60 to 90 minutes a day, I am not taking a trade every day. I'm waiting for kind of that perfect spot to jump in. Sizing is where you make the money trading. A lot of people that make a crazy amount of money trading, it's not from taking 80 trades in one day. It's from taking, a lot of the times you see it's from taking one or two trades a month. They just have their pattern that they look for, and when they find it, they make $50,000 off of it. And so that's why it's I don't think you need to go into that kind of too much of trying to take so many trades. I mean, some of course there's people that make money scalping. I'm not going to knock on it, but it's just not. I don't think it's great for beginners, and it's not for everyone. Market's about to open. Yeah, the opening breakout range is kind of the opposite of my strategy. Um, I definitely see the potential for trying it and doing it, but I always just find that I think the reversal side is better. Um, but it's very, very popular right now on social media. What is the time frame on my support and resistance? Usually I draw it off of a 5 minute or a 15 minute. Just look at big picture. 5 minute really shows it plenty fine right now here on the NASDAQ. It's kind of coupling this yesterday high with the overnight low here to draw this level. And then we just got kind of this double top here for this. And then I also just drew this little mini one just to see, okay, well, if we're going to be really bullish today, maybe we'll come and test this and then capture a move up. ES, S&P 500 is pretty much the same thing. But the ES actually didn't make a double top overnight. It's actually made kind of a consistent high. And I wonder if this high actually pulls down here to kind of make a channel. And it does. So that's definitely something to think about and watch. I'm actually going to put that on my 1 minute chart just to be aware of it. And to me, it looks like we're going to have a choppy open. I can see the first 10 or 30 minutes being choppy. I mean, look at this garbage pre-market overnight. We're just in this crappy range right now. The Nasdaq's kind of respecting this range. The S&P 500, it's a little more trendy, but it's still just not much movement. Actually, if you think about it, like this is 10. We're in just kind of a 10-point range, so that's pretty low volatility compared to normal. Oil seems to be just holding this downtrend right now. Kind of watching that on a 5 minute or a 1 minute chart. To me, like this, so this is kind of what I like to look for, is we had this big spike up here in oil. It's got these fair value gaps indicating a pretty unhealthy move. And to me, it looks like it's starting to fail. And so I don't trade oil, but this is a nice pattern that if this fails, I think it's probably likely that it gives all this up and pushes down to here. So if you took a trade based on that, you would get two or three times your risk. And so that's generally the system I use for taking trades and what I like to see. That's more of my bread and butter, um, high value, I'll like put full size on that because I think and it's with the downtrend. There's kind of a downtrend line here as well. To me, those are better spots. And seeing if oil does that, it would probably put a little upwards pressure on the market and help us push higher. So that's definitely a spot to watch that if this pulls back and we look for a long down here. I would want to see that would be a nice little extra confirmation, I think. The freehand drawing tool I have is it's called uh, Epic Pen. Wait, I might be wrong. Yep, Epic Pen. I think I got my updated risk reward tool to work too, which is nice. It was not fun having that cause glitches yesterday. Mid mid potentially looking for a trade. It kind of messes up how I'm looking to get in. Anyone just coming in? Welcome. Um, I am trading the S&P 500 futures, and I'm just looking to that and the Nasdaq futures, and I'm just looking to potentially take a long down here. It really depends how the market opens here. Nasdaq is actually pushing higher, while the S&P is pushing lower. That's not great divergence. Usually, to me, divergence in those two signals difficulty to get a good read on things. So this kind of sells off. Oil to me looks like it's going to sell off here. I mean, it's just slowly grinding lower to give this move up. Big picture though, the I guess the reason against this is a bottom off of a major support zone. So we could pop up, sell off a little bit, and then continue higher. So like the 50% level of that as a pullback would be here. Would pretty much align up with this previous swing over here too. So that's definitely a potential spot that I could see oil bouncing if it's going to have more of a bullish move to the upside, and it's going to break this downtrend. Getting a little divergence still on these markets. Do I ever take a trade? I'm trying. I'm not forcing something though. This week has just been garbage, if you ask me. I don't take trades very often. I'm much more of a cherry picker of showing up every day, looking for a clean setup. And the market right now is just very, very difficult. It's so news driven. It's very uh, just sitting around waiting, opening at the chop because of the overnight news has been funky. Both markets are going different directions, which makes things harder to read. Did anyone see? I think this was a couple days ago, but did anyone see about Spirit Airlines just full stop? That's crazy. I can't believe that just happened. I wonder how that worked with their stock price. No, it was basically zero anyway. I wonder what happened here. Some like buyout prediction or potential. So the stock shot up, wow, 600% and then just cratered when they just shut down. You got a Spirit, yeah, playing in your driveway? Yeah, I'm sure they're just selling those things off like hotcakes now. You got a big yellow banana in your driveway. I'm trying to see if this seems like a spot that it looks like the market wants to bounce. Because if the Nasdaq's just going to grind higher a little bit, and it looks like we might bounce here, I could be into it. But definitely want to give it a few more minutes here to see how it opens. Do I have data on the time it takes me to identify a setup? I feel like it can be pretty quickly. I mean, it's hard to know exactly what you mean by time. I think the big thing is like, do I see something that I like? It's waiting for the market to set that up. And that can be 15 minutes from the open, or it can be an hour. It just really depends what the market does. So we're at this kind of first support that I potentially look for along here on the ES. Oil is still potentially showing a grind lower. Nasdaq is just slowly grinding higher. I don't want to get long on the Nasdaq, just because to me I don't really see where to get in here. Versus the ES is potentially making a bottom. So we've got a little bit of a unhealthy move here actually this morning. If you look at the fair value gap on a 1 minute or a 5 minute, sorry. I think we're kind of just looking for a trend break right now to see, trying to analyze what's going on here with this trend. And if this continues lower, that's totally fine. There's honestly a better support level to buy off of. Yeah, usually these markets have been, I feel like the markets have been, you got to be patient at the open. Like yesterday, the market started to move an hour after the open. That's why I've started to stay a tiny bit longer, because the market doesn't know what it wants to do in the first 30 minutes a lot of the time. It'll start to set something up, but it'll do these kind of round bottoms, and the trend moves a lot slower. And so I think it's not that I've taken anything based on that, but I've been working to get better at taking spots like that with those round bottoms. I was talking about it 15 minutes ago, um, about kind of slowly adding something to your strategy over time, not just trying to do it in real time, seeing it slowly, um, documenting it, and figuring out how you want to approach that, um, because it takes a different kind of style of execution. The little red and green sideways indicator, that's called a fair value gap indicator. Pretty much any platform has it. So just trying to wait and see if this sets up, a head and shoulders here. I want to see something like this, and I think I would get long on that. Probably kind of actually like what I was talking about earlier. Uh, I might try and put my stop more at the lows versus a higher low, just to give this market a little bit more wiggle room, since we are kind of choppy. And if we continue to sell off, I just won't get in, and I'll look to see, um, if we bottom down here. But it's not my strategy to look for just a continuation trade to the downside here. Big picture, we're just, and the Nasdaq's really just in this choppy sideways range. But that's kind of what it was in yesterday too, before it just started to slowly grind higher. Oil's doing a spike higher, pretty big spike. So this is where on oil, if I go to a 15-minute chart, we could be doing a bottom here, and oil could get going. At least giving back some of this move. Thinking about where that could be, it could come up to here. This is definitely kind of a minor level on the way up. Uh, if kind of look at 50% pullback, that could be somewhere up there of where that move kind of started. So that'll be something to kind of watch as well. But also something to think about is, uh, I feel like when the market's been open, the correlation from these two hasn't been that crazy. In terms of like yesterday, oil just kind of sat here while the market grinded higher. And so I feel like unless oil is having a crazy sell off from news, it's not really affecting the market inversely as much. So unless we get a big move going up in oil, I don't think that's really going to do much to the market. Like if oil is doing this, I think that's a signal that the market's actually going to go up. because there's not enough downwards pressure. But this is where the market does have potential to go either direction. We are having, even though we're moving up, it's a very volatile up. We might totally have a pullback here and then continue higher. This trend up has been, we'll have times where it just slowly grinds, but generally it's been kind of crazy. And so keeping that in mind of any direction I think is possible in this market. So that's why I don't want to just blindly be betting either direction. And I think to the short side is a little riskier with the potential that, because we're in an overall uptrend, it's likely, like, here, if you think, oh, we've had a big move up, we're clearly failing to break out this high, I'm going to bet short thinking it's going to reverse, and it holds. Every time that we have a move up, the pullback doesn't go all the way down. The pullback is shallow, right? We're making higher highs and higher lows. And so here we've made a higher high. We've actually made a lower high right here, but we might just, it could just pull back here and then continue up. And so that's where it's hard to bet to the downside, when this could bounce anytime, do a little fail breakout and reverse to the upside. The resistance levels are breaking a lot more often, and the supports are holding a lot sooner. NASDAQ here is kind of bouncing off of this. Kind of broken this up channel. Just watching oil to see here what it's doing. This is definitely kind of looks like a head and shoulders on a 5-minute chart. I think I'm just going to leave it on that for a little while, just to kind of reduce some of the noise that it's giving. And I think the 5-minute charts recently have been pretty clean in telling you more of the trend direction. Trump news in 25 minutes. Yeah, well, we'll see what that does. Because we're just in no man's land right now for the NASDAQ. The S&Ps are, I think, a little more trendy this morning, actually. So I mean, mainly to get long, like what I would like to see in the ES here, I'd want to see this come back up here and essentially set up a head and shoulders. Or what we could do is what we've been doing more recently is cut some kind of like slow round bottom and look to have the trend continue higher. NASDAQ, I would think, would probably be confirming that sooner, but I don't want to jump in along here on the NASDAQ if it looks like the ES is just going to grind lower, because that's going to likely pull the NASDAQ down. I like the signals that the S&P 500 gives more than the NASDAQ. I felt like the last week I was starting to look at the NASDAQ a little too much. I was starting to trade it a little bit more the week before and the week before that, I think, because the NASDAQ swings were better, and they were working out better. But then I also felt like recently this week it's actually not been as good. And again, I prefer prefer to just trade the S&Ps and kind of go with those signals and use the NASDAQ as more confirmation. You like this for a continuation trend down? It could totally. I mean, we're just in this tight downtrend right now. But to me, like there's nothing for me to do here. What am I going to do? Like enter in, there's no way for me, for my strategy, to just enter in short here, even if my assumption is that it's going to continue down. So I'm just patiently waiting for this to potentially break. I don't know if it does, but the idea is that I'm ready for that if it decides to reverse and swap. And to me, that's what I want to look for. And that's where I'll take a trade if it does happen. Because the NASDAQ is looking good here. And the hard part is sometimes the NASDAQ might just shoot up and the ES might just kind of do this. But that's the tricky part about trying to juggle the two markets. You think there's a crash coming at some point? I don't think it's not worth your time or mental energy to try and predict when a crash is coming. People have been trying to do that for centuries or decades, and like look on a daily chart. If you just look at this crazy uptrend we've been in for the past couple weeks, I'm sure there's in here as it was going up. There's so many times where it's like, oh, we've from here. It's like, oh, we have to have a pullback at this point. We're so overextended all the way up here. Oh, we're at all-time highs. We have to have a pullback somewhere in here. Oh, it's starting to slow down. Here comes the big sell-off. It's trying to predict a top without any actual reason to predict a top. I think you're right. At some point, we're going to have some kind of pullback, but also that pullback could just look like this. It could just be sideways chop. That's another way for the market to work off this crazy move up we've had. And so I try not to think about trying to predict big moves like that because I think it's just impossible to some extent. Just read what the market's telling you. And right now, to me, the market's telling us, or me, that we're in just this kind of slow grind, some volatile pullbacks uptrend. Anytime oil news comes in, we'll get a spike lower, but then we immediately just reverse it. Or we get a spike higher and kind of have a pullback and reverse it and then continue up. So that's kind of why I don't like to do that, Is this all-time high? So this is all-time highs for the NASDAQ up here. This is starting to do a trend break on the ES. And I'm not worried, I don't think. I mean, we'll definitely see how the NASDAQ reacts to all-time highs. Maybe it'll pop up here and just rip lower. And I actually might, and this could be popping up here and just continue lower. But if this is going to bottom here, I don't think the NASDAQ's going to have any problem breaking to all-time highs. That's not really a resistance level that has been causing issues recently. So I don't think I'm not necessarily looking for a short actually up here. So just move that off the screen for a little less confusion. And this seems like the left shoulder. So I think if we pop up here, have a little bit of a pullback of some kind, testing this zone, to me that looks like a good spot to look for some upside. Again, with kind of the idea that we just did a little bit lower and we're going to continue higher. Oil here, to me, on a 5-minute, that's a pretty big fake to the upside. And again, could continue that downtrend, which puts upward pressure and likely to move higher more on the ES here. I don't really know if I'll go full size or half size yet. I think it'll just depend on how the NASDAQ is looking at reacting to all-time highs here. And then also how this kind of sets up and where I'll put my stop. You know, am I just going to do it at the lows here and just try and go for kind of that move up, knowing that there is kind of some of that still volatileness in the market. You notice sometimes that when you imagine how the market's going to go, something unexpected will happen. Yeah, I try and not imagine or try and put predictions on what the market's doing. When I talk about like, oh, if the market does this, I'll do that. To me, that's not a prediction. That's thinking, okay, to enter in a trade, this is what I want to see. And to me, that's different than, oh, I think the market's going to bounce here or something. You know, to me, it's following, okay, I want to see this. And to me, that gives a signal potential of, you know, this, right? So that's how I like to kind of do it. And so then you're not putting a prediction and a bias on the market, because then if you're wrong, um, you know, I feel like it makes it a little harder on you mentally, and you can sometimes get married to that prediction. Versus, yeah, like so you're planning for certain scenarios to happen, and based on those scenarios, what are you going to do? So you're planning ahead and not reacting. So when it does happen, you already have a plan in place. Pretty big pullback here. You know, my thought would be on the NASDAQ, if it's going to pull back, it might just be testing this opening price high and then continue higher. And then the ES might just bounce here, or could be totally wrong, and this could be a day where we rip lower from here. And the NASDAQ is, that's all it kind of had, and the ES actually continues lower. And to get short on that, I'm not really sold on that yet. But there's definitely that kind of potential there with the ES coming up and testing this and selling off from it. And then the NASDAQ testing this. I think the question, you know, it's you just got to wait and see how this kind of reacts here. But I think if this moves all the way higher here, I am okay jumping in long. I think I'll actually go a little smaller size though. If I do go long. Oil still here looks to the downside. I like that. Just kind of waiting to see how this plays out. I think if it starts to show strength, I'll put in an order above this swing high right here. And I don't want to go full size just because the two markets are a little bit different. The ES is kind of showing some weakness. Like the NASDAQ could still go up and the ES could just kind of flounder here a little bit. But I do want to get in the ES more. And then I'm just going to have my stop all the way down here at the lows. This is kind of what I was talking about earlier, is like, this isn't a crazy rip reversal. I think this is a much more slow, methodical. We potentially look to get in a bottom here. This is a nice final attempt to go lower that's failing. And I want to give it some of that wiggle room. Just with the idea that, you know, the major trend might pick up. We might start to go a little higher. Be careful. Yeah, that's why I think I'm going kind of half size and keeping a wider stop, because I think there's that, you know, it's just not as strong of a setup potentially. But this is kind of what I was talking a little bit about earlier, is these are spots I kind of like. I see the potential for a major bottom here. You know, on a 5 minute, We've got some kind of good unhealthy move here. And oil is still kind of just chugging lower, I think, after that fake higher. I think oil to me looks like it's going to do this. And to me, that'll push the market up. NASDAQ here, there's totally possibility that the NASDAQ makes a double top here. But I think the overall uptrend, I want to be jumping in spots like this to be in this current market we have, to be just looking to capture a little bit of move to the upside. And so I like to jump in when it kind of breaks this high, because to me that helps confirm that this is starting to make higher highs and higher lows. And then, I'm giving it a pretty wide stop here at the lows, thinking that we could bounce around here a little bit. But if we're going to bottom here, to me, this is the extreme low that's been put in. And if it breaks lower, that's okay. That's, to me, okay, the trend's not reversing, and it's going to continue lower for the day. But if this is the bottom and we're going to kind of slowly grind higher, I'll have captured that move. And we'll just kind of see how it plays out, let it do its thing, and just, I'll have a little bit of a wider stop, and I'm not going to move my stop up too quickly, knowing that the market recently has been pretty back and forth. And so that's pretty much just to, I guess, quickly run through my checklist since I am in a trade now. Pretty much at this reversal zone, I would say the big picture to me is that we've come down to this reversal zone. Market overall is in a larger uptrend, so I want to be trying to buy these bottoms wherever they happen. And then we've had kind of an unhealthy move down this morning. There's not a crazy one, but I'm looking to essentially see, okay, are we going to reverse this? Do we just give back to the market open, or do we kind of continue higher? And then going to 1 minute, this is kind of the downtrend we had. We were kind of just in this methodical downtrend. And then the trend was broken to me when we broke that downtrend here, and then we made a higher low. This is kind of the reversal pattern, is it starts to make a higher low here. And then the candlestick confirmation to me is when it breaks above this swing high. So to me, that's confirming that it's put in a higher low here, and it's actually made a higher high. So it's starting to do this. And the NASDAQ here is starting to do this as well. And the NASDAQ's at all-time highs. But to me, all-time highs aren't as scary right now, because all-time highs are generally just getting broken and we're just grinding higher. And another really good confirmation I liked is oil here on a 5 minute. We did have this downtrend, and it looked to me for a second we might start booming up, but this big candlestick just went up and caused this big reversal trap. So I think oil is going down to here. Just to kind of look at that on a 1 minute, big trap here in oil. And I think if it breaks this kind of spot, I think it's going to push this low here. And so that's going to put upwards pressure in the market, which is good for our trade. This is half size. So I went half size just because there's still kind of a lot of funky signals in the market right now of back and forth. But I want to be trying to, I was talking a little bit earlier of I want to be trying to capture spots like this, where the market is doing these kind of choppy, slow bottoms. And to me, it's not a higher potential trade, so it's not worth betting the farm on, but it's still worth executing on, because the big picture here, I see this at some point kind of potentially going up here, right? And so I want to participate in that, but it's not worth putting a lot of money on, because it's lower potential to work out percentage wise of just having a win or loss. And then the risk reward isn't as good, because to me, I need to put my stop all the way down at the extreme low here, because there's potential for there to be volatile choppiness. And so to me, those are reasons why I want to do smaller size. Risk reward isn't as good, and the percentage chance of having a big move, I guess that's similar risk reward, but the percentage chance of having a really good move is less. NASDAQ is kind of shooting up here. And the reason why I didn't jump in here on the NASDAQ, because the NASDAQ right here kind of set up that same pattern, is the S&P 500 was still grinding lower in its downtrend. And so to me, the S&P 500 could have just dragged it lower. And so I wanted to wait for this signal first. And so I don't want to move my stop up to break even yet, because this is a methodical trend. We might totally come to right here, test this previous swing, and then continue higher, right? And so spots like this, I want to be a little more patient, knowing that the big picture is to the upside, and it's just going to be a slow, methodical grind higher. I think once the ES gets up to here to 2x, I'll probably definitely tighten it up pretty quickly. Getting 2x on this trade, I think, would be a great win. And then stop loss wise, so I haven't moved it up yet, but I definitely have a kind of a mental stop here of, I could totally move it here to reduce it a little bit. I think it just depends on what a pullback here looks like. And so just kind of waiting here to see how it's likely that we have some kind of pullback here. And I just want to give that wiggle room, see what that looks like, and then go from there. And then, of course, just watching oil here too. To me, oil looks like it's just going to slowly break lower. And again, that's if oil breaks here, to me, that'll probably push the S&P up here into a much better profit range. So we might have a little tight uptrend like this, but if that breaks, I'm not concerned. I'm not really going to keep track of that. Hopefully all that makes sense. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Of course, if this thing starts moving and I gotta pay attention a little bit more, I will miss those. But to me right now, it looks like we're probably gonna have a little bit of a pullback. And on a 5-minute, a pullback to here and then continue higher, that's totally fine. Big picture, big picture, a higher low right here is totally fine in this uptrend. I'm not looking for a very fast move to the upside. That's not, that's my normal like high level trade where I take a lot, I put a lot of size on. But to me right now, this is much more of a, the NASDAQ here isn't kind of this, right? It's much more of the NASDAQ's in a pretty strong trend actually. But kind of watching how this trend just forms and plays out. What leverage do I have on the S&P? It's not really how the futures work. I have a video on my channel that kind of talks about how futures work. And so I would definitely recommend going and looking at that, because it kind of works in a different way. First trade in a few days. Yeah, I mean, this week has been tricky, but also I'm trying to adapt what I'm doing to adjust to the market a little. And so this is kind of that process. NASDAQ's just kind of pushing higher. And again, like NASDAQ might break this and hold this for a little bit and continue higher. But I also don't want to get married and just give it a huge stop. I'd let this come down to kind of this area, right? Like I think the ES, a healthy pullback would be down to here somewhere. On a 5-minute, I think that looks totally fine as a higher low. Because I'm looking for more of the bigger picture play here. I'm assuming that it's going to have a pullback. But if it starts to pull back like this, comes up and makes a lower high, that to me looks like, okay, this is kind of just a fake higher, and it's actually just going to go down. and I'll try and manage my stop there a little bit more. And the thought is, okay, well, the Nasdaq's at all-time highs. Is it going to fail here? I'm not really seeing any signals of that yet. Again, it could come down here, bounce off of this previous all-time high, and then continue higher. And again, we have oil here. Until oil comes down to, I think, here, I think we're going to cleanly move down to here. And so to me, that's a good catalyst still pushing the market up. And the hard part about these slow trend trades is that you want to do something. Like, I would love to put my stop loss at break even right now and take the risk of a loss off the table. But to me, it's too early. I would want to see this pull back here and break out above this swing before I move to break even, or for it to put some kind of solid bottom here and retest this high, then I would go above this swing. But to me, it's just having a pullback here, which is totally healthy. And that could pull back here and bottom. That could pull back down here and bottom. That could pull back down here and bottom. Oh, I actually do not want to accidentally put an order there. That was close. And so that's why I haven't moved it yet. And I don't want to increase my size. I don't want to double it, just because to me, the trade hasn't changed. I'm trading 2 contracts of the ES futures right now. Nasdaq hit a resistance line. I see what you mean right here, this little uptrend. Yeah, I mean, it definitely has potential, but also if you look at it, there's not really it just hasn't really been testing that on the downside. So you could you bring this up and say, well, now we're in this kind of uptrend channel, and we actually have kind of tested that too. Oil though looks like it's still pushing lower. Nothing to do right now but be patient and just see how this pullback plays out. Nasdaq is still just doing its thing. There's not really, that's the hard part about these trades, is you start trying to read into every little candlestick, and you don't want to do that. You want to just say, okay, my thesis is that we're going to go higher, and there's going to be some garbage in the middle here, and I don't want to make any decisions based on that. My thesis is that we have bottomed for the day, and I want to capture some of that move to the upside, even if it's just a small amount. Like, I'm not looking for a massive trade here. I'm small size, kind of essentially looking for a similar move to, pretty much any of these bottoms. It's kind of hard to show this since it's kind of moving the screen. But like, anytime we've had a bottom here, we've kind of pretty much moved higher, right? The market's in a major uptrend. And so kind of just trying to watch that. And some spikes here. I think someone said, is there the Trump news popping right now? I think someone said, I don't know, maybe Trump is doing some speech right now or anything. The stream doesn't have a delay. That's on your end. Just a little bit of a spike there. And this is why I don't want to have a tight stop right now. I might move my stop up to here, actually, because that's a pretty big kind of flush. And I think if it flushes again, I'm okay getting out. But the Nasdaq here just took that flush and made a new high. So things are still looking strong. Oil here on the flip side just did a little spike opposite way. So it's definitely, this is tricky to manage in. And I'm trying not to overanalyze, On a 5-minute, this is exactly what I was just talking about. If we just put in a little spike lower of a 5-minute, to me, that looks gorgeous. I don't know if I've ever said that about a trade, but and so here I kind of want to move a stop up here because I think if it, there is the potential for it to be topping here, the Nasdaq and the ES, but again, it's I want to give it a little bit of room here because this is the spot where I want to see it bottom. And to me, it's still looking good. I would like to move my stop up once it starts to push a new high here, because to me it's attempting to continue higher, and then it fails and it makes a lower high. That's kind of following the swings of the trend versus getting scared that it's having to pull back and getting out. That's why I've done smaller size and had a wider stop, so I can hold through kind of these market moves. Because I know that the market's been funky and difficult to trade in the sense of these crazy swings. Like if I just go back and to yesterday, where was it? Like the Nasdaq here, it didn't have as clean as an uptrend, but it had all these spikes lower before it started to go, and so that's why I'm kind of looking to hold through. And until this starts to like set up a head and shoulders here or something and really start to show a topping pattern, I don't think there's any reason to get out of this yet. But this is one reason why it's like, okay, I'm not doing large size, I'm doing smaller size, because you can see it's very difficult to, this might play out for another hour and then we finally get up here. But there's a lot of difficultness to hold through and manage. A lot of people saying they got stopped out. Yeah, that's exactly why it's hard. I mean, that's why I have a wider stop and I have smaller size. Smaller size allows me to be okay not moving my stop up yet, because if I had full size on this, I would move my stop up to here. And that might still be a good stop spot, but because of the intensity, it makes me want to take that risk off the table sooner. It allows me to be more relaxed and let things play out. Maybe we're in this uptrend right now. And so that's, to me, why having a wider stop and why having smaller size in this kind of market makes more sense. Because of this difficultness right now. And I think much more higher, like if we come up here, I'll move my stop to break even. My only thought is we could have a little bit of a pullback here and then continue higher. Nasdaq made a new high, which is great. Oil here is just kind of sitting there. I think if oil just chops here, that's good. I think if oil goes down or sideways, that's good. Any spike up in oil isn't great. Looks like we had a good move up. So I'm going to go break even now, because to me, it's pushing up here. And if we have a pullback, that's not great. The only thought actually here is, do I want it below this low? Because again, we're kind of going like this. And it could pop down here and continue higher, again, because it's just kind of volatile. This is the difficult part about not entering it on the Nasdaq, is the Nasdaq here is just chugging higher while the ES here is struggling more. The Nasdaq would have given a lot better risk reward if I jumped in here. It would have been at 2x right now. But to me, I preferred trading the ES here. And I think I'm struggling here if I want to have my stop here at break even or below this low. I think I would rather give it a little bit more time here. If it breaks that up here, I think I'll move it. But again, that's where as long as I'm capturing a move, I'm okay with that. Um, this 5 minute fair value gap, I think someone mentioned, has been closed. To look at the market open was right here. Oh, accidentally brought up a random window. Um, but other than that, like I don't really see, Nasdaq's starting to go crazy here, which is a little concerning. If this just goes too parabolic, it's gonna have, this is an unhealthy move now. It could snap back here, and that's gonna put downwards pressure on the ES. Nasdaq hit 28,900. Yeah, it's a pretty big psychological level. If this stays in an uptrend, the Nasdaq, I would assume it would come down here, pull back here, and then continue higher. And the S&Ps here, kind of tricky that it's having this kind of pullback. This is kind of why I don't want to go break even yet. But I'm starting to think that the Nasdaq is getting so overextended that it's gonna be hard for the idea was that the S&P 500 might catch up to some extent. I'm just looking at over here. I'm just looking at this in terms of the S&P 500 is at up nothing today, and then the Nasdaq is pretty much up 0.5%. So it's not up a crazy amount in that sense. But in terms of a 1 minute chart, is it overextended? It's getting there. But just because it's done that doesn't mean, to me, this looks like, oh, it could have stopped here. We might just pull back and continuously grind higher. The Nasdaq could slow down, and the S&P 500 could actually pick up. That's exactly what happened yesterday. And if I get stopped out here at a tiny bit of risk, I'm totally fine with that. I'm happy with how I jumped in on this trade, how I sized, how I'm, for me, I'm trying to get data on me executing in these kind of more volatile, choppy markets where you kind of just need to wait for the big picture to play out. Like this on a 5 minute still looks solid. Like we have a bottom here and a higher low. That's why I don't want to move my stop to break even yet, because on a 5 minute, this looks like it's just going to do this. Oil on a 1 minute here, just popped up here and is selling off a little bit. On a 5 minute to kind of reduce some of the noise. Oil had a big spike up here, and I think it looks like it wants to test the lows or at least stay down here. So that's what I'm kind of looking at. And so it's hard to not read too much into these micro moves. That's risk size management. Yeah. I mean, that's just the math. Like, that's another huge aspect about trading that just takes time to get to know when to do that. To me, if I was full size on this trade, it would be really a struggle to manage properly right now. And I don't think it warrants full size. If it comes down here and I get stopped out here, I lose uh $200-$300, and that's compared to my full size, that's nothing. But I still have the potential to capture a swing up here, which might be like $1,500 or $1,600. It's not about making. I like to try and just cherry pick and do full sizes, but I also want to try and start taking some of these not as high level or high quality reversals, especially in this market that is so strong to the upside right now. I do trade live every day. It's kind of new. I've been doing it, I think, for five. This is week 5. I pretty much live every day in the mornings. 15, 30 minutes before the market opens, look for a trade. A lot of times I'm just looking for a trade. My whole thing is be patient, wait for those really high probability spots, and then take a trade. And, look for kind of a swing like this. The NASDAQ here, we had kind of some uptrend lines here that the NASDAQ is clearly just blown out of. And if you actually look at this, we have come down and kind of bounced off of this. So I think this kind of overexcited move here has worn off a little, but we could start to go sideways. I think ideally is if the NASDAQ just kind of slows down some momentum here, that doesn't, the ES will kind of start to catch up. But we might just, oil here could just bottom, shoot up. That's, I think, the thing's going against the trade right now. But again, this is I think the big picture thesis is we will just grind higher. And if we do, I'll make money. And if we don't, I'll lose a tiny bit at this point. Not much else to it at this point. Yeah, so the oil double bottom, I mean, I think there's definitely potential there. I think on a big picture chart of oil, like if I zoom this out to the 15-minute, we might totally be double bottoming right here. But on a smaller time frame, if I go to like a 5-minute, this has potential. This has plenty of room to test the lows here and to continue lower before it bottoms. It hasn't necessarily shown. It could bottom right here because this trend is broken. It could totally do a double bottom right here. And so I think that potential is totally there. But I don't think oil is going to have a crazy move to the upside unless news happens. That's just how oil has been moving recently. NASDAQ's still just grinding higher. ES is a struggle fest here. But, just let it do its thing. I think I'm just going to leave it on a 5-minute for a little while. Trying to look at a couple questions here. Sorry if I'm missing them. Obviously, when I'm in a trade, I'm trying to focus and look at things. Your risk reward tool doesn't change contracts. I'm assuming you're talking about having my custom risk reward tool, because the one I have here is a custom one that I've made for NinjaTrader. And it should change. You should have a version that has this in orange right here. I technically have a version in beta right now that has a couple of changes on it that I haven't released. And so that's maybe the slight difference, but you should have this change contracts. If it's not changing the order quantity up here, that's because it's off by default. You need to go into the properties here and click, where is it? Click this auto set quantity. I have that off by default just for people's protection, because technically this thing could change your contracts and automatically put you in like 30 contracts, and so that's kind of risky. NASDAQ's slowing down here just a little bit. Oil's popping up a little bit. And the whole thing of like, oh well, I could have just got out here for a little bit of profit. To me, that's not worth it. I'm looking to see this kind of do this. And if I don't get out at somewhere between 1 and 2x, to me, the trade wasn't even worth the risk of putting it on. And the thesis of this being in an uptrend is not broken yet. This is a live account. It's not prop firms. I don't trade gold. I pretty much only just trade the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ. I look at oil right now because it's so correlated to the market. A lot of times before the Middle East kind of news and situation going on, to say it lightly, I guess. I didn't look at oil right now, but because of how impactful oil is to the market, that's that's what I'm watching. Because it's so inversely correlated a lot of the time. If I draw, yeah. So Nasdaq, I think someone said this already. Is Nasdaq is kind of hitting a resistance level. Um, I'm not too concerned about resistance levels. Um, I think at this point, Nasdaq, we could reverse here. I think another option is it just starts to kind of go sideways. Is it had this is a strength move? It's not an overextended move, and it just starts to kind of peter out and lose that momentum, but it doesn't necessarily give back this move. I'm not looking to short this move. The market's too strong right now. It's in no man's land, and the hope is that, or the plan is, if this plays out, that ES would catch up and grind higher as well. I don't like to say hope because that's not really a great. You want to be careful about what you vocalize in trading, because it's so psychological and it can impact you. Which days am I live streaming? I live stream every day that I trade, so pretty much 4 to 5 days a week. Obviously, if I'm sick or I'm a holiday or whatever, I'm not streaming. But pretty much I plan on pretty much doing it every morning. 30 minute looks bullish. I'll take it. I think I'm not going to read much higher than a 5 minute time frame. To me, reading higher than that, it just my trade's too small to necessarily go off of a larger time frame. I can use the larger time frame to help kind of confirm the bias, but in terms of managing my stop and my targets, I don't want to manage differently. What software am I using to trade? So I am trading on NinjaTrader. It's pretty much a futures focused only platform. I pretty much just trade futures looking for reversals. And so I think they're a great way to start trading futures if that's what you want to do. For anyone new, I like to keep it super super simple. I don't have any indicators on my chart. I literally just read price action, and to me that's enough of a signal. I think it's daunting initially because it's, as a beginner, you want to have indicators that tell you kind of what to do, right? Because the market's a lot, as a beginner, there's so much going on. There's so much to think about. There's so much to do. And so indicators seem like a nice shortcut. But I would say that they don't necessarily help you as much. You want to, they help some, don't get me wrong, but you don't want to overdo it. So you want to try and keep it as simple as possible. And actually, NinjaTrader right now has I'll just bring this over real quick, has this demo trading tournament that you can sign up for. And it's a demo trading competition that has a prize pool of real money. So it has like a $250,000 prize pool, and you can go sign up for that. And there's a couple qualifying tournaments that have a first place prize of like $5,000, and then there's other people that get paid. And then the final one, literally the final person gets $100,000. And so it's literally free for new or existing users. And it literally just takes an email, and you just demo trade. And so I think it's a great way for someone starting out, not wanting to risk real money, to kind of add a little bit of risk on or intensity on your trading. You might not necessarily win the money, but I think signing up and having that more focused time, I think is helpful. So there's a link in that in the description. NinjaTrader, it is, I would say, NinjaTrader is free, but just like any platform, it does take. You do have to, after a while, have to pay for data. Any platform, you have to pay for live data. On NinjaTrader, if you're trading just kind of the S&P 500 futures and the Nasdaq, it can be as little as $4 a month, versus other platforms I think I see are over $10 a lot of the time. Yeah, you do get data for free for 2 weeks. I think it's only if you sign up through my link. That's kind of a part of signing up through that. I do have a partnership in all transparency, but I've been using them way before that partnership. It was more just, an addition that lined up really well for me. I've been using them. You can just look back at my YouTube videos. I've been using them forever. I think they're the best futures trading platform out there. So this is just kind of in a bull flag right now. Not really much to do other than just, this is kind of what I was expecting jumping into this trade. It's just a slow, methodical grind higher. And I don't want to overmanage. Do I ever trade on my phone? I don't. I think it's the way I trade, it's way too tricky to trade on the phone. For a day trading, fast-paced strategy like this. It's definitely slow and methodical sometimes, but when I'm entering, a lot of the time I'm looking exactly what's going on, and I need to be able to get in right away. I think if you're doing something a little slower, totally you can do that. But it's, not, it just doesn't work for me, and that's all that matters. If it works for you, more power to you. Nasdaq here, just kind of slowly punching higher, and that's why I'm not looking for a short. Is this just seems too strong to bet against it. I think if we punch all the way up to 2x here, I'll definitely tighten up my stop. But I don't know. It really depends on what this move looks like. Because if it looks like we're just going to slowly grind higher, like if we just slowly do this, I'll just move my stop up and let things play out. Letting this kind of if it's just going to keep going up, I'm totally fine to stay in it. I think at this point, I'm going to move to break even. Just out of, take a risk off the table. This is clearly breaking out to the upside. I think this uptrend is pretty clean. There is totally possible that we spike down here and continue higher. But I think if we spike all the way down here, the chance of getting a nice win is just reduced so much that it's not worth it for me to, give that much wiggle room up. You got to think about it as well when you're in a trade. It's not about the max loss. Now I have a max loss of 0, but there's also the profit on the line, right? As you're in a trade, the risk reward essentially changes as it moves in your favor, right? Like this is moving in my favor up to here, right? And so the risk I have is all the way down to here. Like I'm risking $1,000 right now. And so I'm risking $1,000 right now to make 600 if my stop loss or my profit target is only there. And so in a way, my risk reward ratio is roughly 1-to-1 right now. It's not great. And so that's what you want to be thinking about it as that stuff kind of happens too. How does NinjaTrader compare to TradeStation? I have no clue. I've never traded TradeStation on TradeStation. A lot of the big platforms, the problem with them, if you're trading futures, is the margin requirement. So futures require something called margin. It's basically like collateral. And I don't know if those big platforms like TradeStation, a lot of the time they don't have great intraday margin requirements, which allows you to trade really small size. NinjaTrader has $500 worth of margin required for one ES contract, but if you trade the micro version, which is really good for small accounts, it's a tenth of that size, and so it only costs you $50 worth of margin. And so that's a big benefit of trading on a brokerage like NinjaTrader that allows a much smaller margin requirement. I will say, I just lost my train of thought actually. I'm not going to try and explain everything about futures. I do have a futures explain video on my trading channel or on my YouTube channel that I would recommend to go look at after this. My YouTube videos are actually mainly what I've done before I started live streaming, and so those are really well done. To toot my own horn, they'll walk you through my strategy, how futures work, how I draw these pre-market levels. So you gotta have a lot of those basic questions answered, so then you can come into the live streams and kind of understand more of what we're looking for. Still just grinding higher. The hard part about this is like, oh, this move up in the Nasdaq is so strong, but if you look back, look, we've had this one, like this one looks like, oh, it's got to end at some point, and it had to really get going before it ended. And so to me, it's like this is going pretty good, but I don't think it's necessarily at a point where it's so overextended that it's just going to rip back lower. Why not put my stop loss a tick above my break even so I get the commissions back? To me, it's pennies. It doesn't really move the needle. I would prefer to just kind of to enter in this trade with 2 ES contracts round trip. I think I'm going to be paying like $5-6. It does definitely add up over time, especially if you're scalping. That's one reason why I don't like to scalp. If you're taking like 5-10 trades in this move, even if they're all profitable, commissions eat you alive. But for me, because I don't take trades that often, the commissions aren't a big deal to me. What's interesting is we're moving higher here, and just to pull up oil here again, is oil's moving higher too. So to me, that's a good sign. If oil's moving up and we're moving up, if oil moves down or sideways, that puts even more upwards pressure on the SPY here, that I think it'll just continue to move higher. Now we're looking like we're about to break above this super minor resistance level. I'm not really worried about it. How many trades do I take a day? It's more about asking the question of how many trades do I take a week. I would say usually it's 1 to 3 a week. It really depends on the week and what the market's doing. The market the last few days has been really choppy. NASDAQ is still just, whoever's long the NASDAQ is having a good day. If I entered in the long on the NASDAQ, it would have been right here. I would have been up 3x by now. But to me, I like the signal, and I would have preferred to enter in on the S&P 500. And that's just I try not to let that eat me up too much, because at the end of the day, sometimes one will do better than the other, and other times it's just completely different. How much capital was required for this trade? $1,000. Because I'm trading 2 ES contracts, and it costs $500 worth of margin for each one. And I am going to start trailing this as we start to get close to this 2x. And we've kind of had this breakout here. If this is just going to slowly grind higher, I'll try and trail if it's just going to swing like this. But if it kind of gets a little overextended here, I'm totally happy just getting 2x on the trade. To me, this is the swing I was looking for. And you know, the NASDAQ is starting to slow down here, and it could just grind higher. But also, I think as it gets higher, mentally as well, but also just in terms of the market, the risk of it pulling back does get higher. And so to me, I'm totally happy with this trade. All I was really looking for was 2x. I'll try and if it really wants to start going up and running, I'll trail my stop loss in that way. But you know, it's I don't want to get greedy on a day like this. To me, a day like this is be methodical, but also get out when it makes sense, because the chance for an oversized move is kind of low, especially because, you know, even though I'm getting 2x up here, the move I'm capturing is big, but it's only 2x because my initial stop was so large. If I, you know, I got in over here, if I jumped in and my stop was here or here, you know, it's like that starts to really change and look different. And so it's kind of hard to not get too married to those things. And if we start to kind of get a little funky like this, you know, and maybe trying to double top here and look like we're going to sell off, I'm okay trailing up and getting out at kind of 1x too. But to me, it's a spike like this is just a quick flush, and it could just get gobbled up and we continue higher. It would be a real bummer if it just shot lower and I got out somewhere down here. That would be frustrating, to say the least. And so that's the hard part about kind of these trades when you're in these spots. And my stop's not necessarily at break even. I think healthy pullback wise is the ES could totally pull back to this. We're in this chop range for a while, and so I think it's totally normal if we pull back down to this, the upper area of this. To me, that's making a breakout, a pullback, and it has a continuation higher potential. The NASDAQ kind of has broken that a little bit. But again, to me, if I think the NASDAQ's slowing down here, if it's just staying in this, and it holds kind of this upper area, I think that's totally fine as well. Oil here is kind of just flagging out a little bit. I don't know what direction. It could go either direction here. I think if it goes to the downside, that's great for us. Stop loss wise, I think if we pull back here, push this, and we fail, I'll move my stop up to here and look to get out. But I want to keep in mind that this uptrend here is been pretty solid so far. We bounced off of this uptrend multiple times. And so I don't really want to get out until that's necessarily broken. But we're definitely, a spike like that definitely does start to put a little bit of alarm bells in my head, especially on the NASDAQ. But also, I don't want to let it scare me with the idea that it totally could just be a little spike lower and get kind of gobbled up. And it's hard. It's hard in a spot like this waiting, because I totally see the potential for this to just, it could all of a sudden just rip lower. And to me, the scaredness of kind of giving back most of the profits of this trade after I don't know, been in this since 10 o'clock, right? It's been basically 50 minutes. And to, you know, have that happen is frustrating. But again, the major thesis is that we are going to have this volatile uptrend, and I need to hold through these pullbacks. And if looking at a 5-minute makes that easier, the 5-minute doesn't show me anything that looks crazy. To me, it looks like we just kind of tapped this, had a little pullback, healthy pullback in an uptrend, and we're just continuing higher. So trying to kind of breathe and calm yourself when those different emotions come up is extremely important when it comes to trading, and not letting your emotions hijack your strategy and your execution of your trading. That's what makes most people lose. Um, and even though I have this plan and I know what I'm doing and I've done this for a very long time, I still have to do that. I don't think I'll never not have to do that. That's just the nature of trading. I'm just kind of waiting for this to make a new high here, and then I'm gonna move my stop up below this low. Oil looks like it might be trying to break lower. If it does, amazing. That's gonna, I think, help the trade. There's no big reasons that this is gonna reverse yet. It's kind of doing what I was thinking. NASDAQ is starting to slow down here, and the ES is starting to catch up. Oil is just chopping around, which doesn't put any negative pressure on things. So I'm going to move my stop up here. Just going to move these away. I guess I'll keep this reversal zone here. I don't trade news at all. I think trading news is gambling. You have no idea of knowing how the market's going to what the market's going to do when certain news comes out. Reacting or seeing how the market reacts to the news and then taking a trade on that, I think that's okay. Like if the market had news and just ripped lower, and then you think it comes down to me, if it came down to like a support zone, set up kind of a double bottom, to me, I would look for that news to get reversed. So anyone who's just coming in, just to kind of talk through this entry, I entered down here after we came down to this reversal zone that I liked. We essentially bottomed here and then made a higher low here. And so to me, it looked like we were going to push back higher. Big picture to me right now is the market's in a slow, grindy uptrend. And so I want to capture those moves. I went with my stop all the way to the extreme low here. And I only went half size on this trade because to me, the risk reward is not as great. I'm only getting 2x as we've given this whole swing up. And then, oh Jesus, holy moly, that's gonna bite me in the butt one day accidentally. My drawing tool is the same hotkey as my entry, and so when I'm clicking back and forth, it accidentally enters in orders. And so I think I really need to change that hotkey because right there you saw I entered in like 5 different orders of 2 contracts each. So this is kind of getting going here. I actually want to get out up here. I don't think I want to just hold this forever this morning. I would rather get out at 2x. I might, if it looks like it'll just do a little pullback and keep going, I'm going to let it do its thing. But I'm going to start trailing up pretty quickly, I think. Because I think at this point, a pullback is down to here. I'm kind of happy with what's going on. Dogs are actually starting to yell at me to go outside. And, if we totally could just continue to grind higher. But to me, it's done what I was looking for. And so I don't want to get out on a stop loss because I think that we could just continue higher here. But I do want to kind of have a tight trailing stop now with the idea that if this kind of moves higher continuously for a couple candlesticks here, I can get a tiny bit more as it kind of goes potentially a little parabolic. And the NASDAQ's doing that. And I've got a dog yelling at me that I'm watching. I'm watching my friend's dog. I have my own dog, but I think one of them's asking me to go to the bathroom. And I don't want, I know, I don't want poo on my floor. So if it, I want to give it a tiny bit of a pullback here, um, just to see if we keep going. But to me, this looks like it's probably going to top out here, in a micro way. It could totally pull back here and continue going higher. But to me, I've kind of caught what I want in the trade. Oil here is starting to kind of rip lower a little bit, which is nice. NASDAQ here, same thing. Going a little bit, getting a little overextended to where we could just, I think the major move up has kind of done. Appreciate you guys saying everything in the chat. I don't necessarily I'm lost for words here. I don't necessarily I see it. That's what I'm trying to say. So I really appreciate you guys saying how helpful you find this. Because that's my goal. I'm doing this to try and be helpful. Not even just, with the idea of people necessarily copying trading, because that's a whole different thing. I don't necessarily suggest doing that. But just the learning part, I think, is awesome. And the fact that it seems like people are really finding it helpful is awesome to see. Tiny pullback here. I'm going to move my stop up again. Now I'm just micro. This is where the analysis and my management has changed, right? Where we're at my rough target and I am now reading into the micro swings. Versus before, I was giving it way more wiggle room. And now that we're at kind of my target and where I'm looking and where I think we could start to slow down, that's when I get a little more strict and tight. And I think 3x on this trade is all the way up here. I'm not really looking to get that. If we get that, amazing. I don't know why my tool is so crazy. Just trying to change this. Hoping a dog's not going to poop on my floor while this final few minutes play out here. I do go live every day. Anyone new? I'm doing this pretty much every day. 15, 30 minutes before the market opens. And this is pretty much setups I just look for. Moves like this. Sometimes you got to be patient. I don't take a trade every day. Am I going to recap this session? I will be live tomorrow and Friday. If you ever go to my channel and click live, I try and schedule out the week. NASDAQ here looks like it's, to me, this looks like a little overextended move and it's going to fail. And so to me, it looks like the move's kind of over. And so that's why I'm trailing up tightly here, but I am giving it a little bit of wiggle room just with this tiny uptrend. But if it knocks me out here, I'm fine with that. We've caught the move. NASDAQ just spiked. There we go. Out on the trade. Great move. Totally happy with how it played out. Just to quickly walk through the entry again, for anyone that missed it, is we just had the market opened up here. We had a sell-off, kind of made a bottom here, a higher low, and then I got in when the market broke this previous high. I got in right here. And the main reason was, big picture, I think, is to the upside. If you zoom out, anytime we have a pullback, we're reversing up, And so to me, the bottoms are where we want to try and be buying right now. And the NASDAQ was all-time highs for a long time, pretty much from the start of the trade. But I wasn't worried about that. So feels good to take a trade after, the first 3 days I just sat here. That's frustrating. That builds up a lot of FOMO. And so, But that's where the patience comes in. You know, if I FOMO'd and took trades on those days where the market just sucked, I could be break even for the week, but now I'm up money. And so that's, you know, that's where the patience pays off, and not trying to force trades every day. Do I ever take profits without my stop loss? Not really. Sometimes I feel like I should. It would give me a better out. But even on this trade, actually, if we look at it, yeah, I mean, I technically, if I just got out at 2x here, I would have got a better fill. Like I got out here versus here. But to me, it's like that's capping the trade versus the potential to even go up a little bit more. I think it was 50-50. And my risk to allow, you know, to go up here and capture a further swing, I think the risk reward there is totally worth it, and totally fine. So I'm going to call it there. If you guys have any questions about the strategy, go check out my YouTube channel. I have a ton of tutorials there. And I will be live tomorrow. Appreciate everyone being here as always. And I'll see you tomorrow.